This week, NVD is not enriching all CVEs. YellowKey bypasses BitLocker. More NPM packages are compromised, and Foxconn suffers a breach. Stay tuned. Below the surface, coming up next. Welcome to Below the Surface. This is episode number 74. We're recording on May 14th, 2026. I'm Paul Sidorian, joined by Major
Vlad.
Chase
Long time no see.
Snyder. Chase, welcome. Vlad Babkin's here with us. We're just coming fresh off of a webinar. Maybe we'll recap that in just a moment. I want to remind everyone that Below the Surface listeners can learn more about Eclipsium by visiting eclipsium.com/go. You can find the ultimate guide to supply chain security, an on-demand webinar I presented called Unraveling Digital Supply Chain Threats and Risk, a paper on the relationship between ransomware and the supply chain, and a customer case study with DigitalOcean. If you're interested in seeing our product in action, you can sign up for a demo. You can do all that at eclipsium.com/go. Great webinar. We just wrapped up on using AI to find vulnerabilities. That was great. It was a lot of not our research that was published this week that I observed, where various people, I didn't even talk about Neil's Provost work on, I can't remember the name of his tool now. I'm blanking on it, but he has a harness that's publicly available on GitHub for finding vulnerabilities. We didn't talk about that. Something to check out. I can actually put a link to that in our show notes. I talked about it briefly on another podcast I did this week, but a lot of, I think, examples of how researchers are using AI to find vulnerabilities. And spoiler alert, you don't need Mythos to find vulnerabilities. That's kind of what I gleaned this week by talking with you guys and reading a lot of those articles. And speaking of vulnerabilities, I thought this was new. Did we talk about this? But this is still a problem. NIST has updated the operations to address the record CVE growth. And I thought there was new conversations about this, but it's still a lingering problem that we're dealing with.
I mean, the number of CVEs that got issued in 2025 massively eclipsed the number from previous year. It was like between 40 and 50,000. And they said it's been like a month ago since they made the announcement about the new prioritization criteria, but NIST used to basically try to enrich all CVEs. Did they try to do them all? Was the previous policy they do them all, and now it's just been a massive trim down of they're going to do known exploited ones. So if something's on the CISA KEV, they'll enrich that within one business day of receipt, they say. And then CVEs for software used within the federal government and CVEs used for critical software. So that's a pretty tight filter. That's going to be way fewer CVEs that get enriched.
But now that you put it that way, though, I think that's actually smart because there's CVEs issued for all kinds of things that you would just kind of spin your wheels enriching that stuff. There's so much esoteric software out there that, like WordPress plugins. Do we need to spend a lot of time enriching WordPress plugins? I see also ones that have exploits is what I look at, because I have a tool. Hopefully someday I'll be able to release the tool, but I have a tool for analyzing vulnerabilities. And so I wanted to take some time to talk about the challenges and get some of your guys' feedback on it. And so one thing when I run queries against the CVE databases, so I wrote this tool because the other tools sucked and or were not being maintained, right? So if I found one that I liked for analyzing CVE data, they would stop maintaining it and then it would break. because the back end, APIs, or they were scraping websites in some cases. So I was like, YOLO, I'm writing my own tool because I need to
What's the
analyze
root data
CVE
source
data.
for that? Like when you say they were scraping
So
websites, where were the websites getting the data? Does NVD publish like a
I wish,
database or a
yeah, I wish I
CSV
could,
file or something? Like how does what
yeah,
is the original data source, the fountain of CVE data?
yeah. So one of the tools I was using was
Mhm.
scraping like
But where are they getting it from?
OpenCVE.io, and they're getting it from, so my primary data source. So what I did when I wrote the tool, and this has been several iterations that I keep this tool actually maintained. I vibe coded it a while ago, and I keep it maintained. Right now I'm vibing it with Opus 4.7, adding some functionality for some stuff that you, the listeners, and the public will learn about soon. The primary database is I have a local NVD database. So I have code that goes out to NVD, pulls down, I think it's in JSON format, pulls down the entire NVD database and stores it in a local SQLite database. I also do that for the actual CVE database. So it's a separate data source. MITRE maintains the CVE database. I do it for that one as well. And so that's the database that I'm querying. And to kind of speak to, like, so I see a lot of fluff because I can search it for like ones that have exploits, and I have actually multiple sources that I pull exploits from, such as like I not just look at the CISA Kev. I also, so all of these are SQLite databases that I build and maintain locally. I have a database of all Metasploit exploits. I have a couple of GitHub repositories that collect exploits that are in my sources. I also parse, and this is where the lack of enrichment will come in, because not all CVE records are created equal. I will parse the CVE record and look for evidence of an exploit available. If whoever is creating and or enriching the CVE record does it right, and they put references and resources section, and that section can have tags, there's a tag for exploit, and so I'll parse that as well, as an additional source. And so and you get into all kinds of problematic things now. If NVD is not enriching the data, that means they're not assigning a CVSS score to all the records. I don't think they were assigning it for all the records before, but now they're assigning it to less records. And typically, what I observe, and different people have different philosophies on this, but when I was writing the tool, I'm like, oh, there's more than one CVSS score. For like a CVE can have many CVSS scores, and it can have not, so it's even more complicated than that. It can have more of different version. So someone may score it in CVSS version 4.0, someone may score it in CVSS 3.1, and then multiple ADPs, authorized data providers, can provide multiple scores. So typically what I'm observing happening, and I'm looking mostly at enterprise edge vendors data that exists in the CVE database today, is that the CNA, whether that's I think I was looking at like Cisco, Fortinet, and Avanti as a test, they all create CVE records differently because they're a CNA. They can create the record themselves, but it's different. Cisco, for example, doesn't put the CPE information when they create a CVE record. Fortinet, however, bravo, props Fortinet, puts the CPE record. I feel like I had to find a way to say something nice about Fortinet on the show, because we've talked about a lot of the vulnerabilities that they had. So here I am giving Fortinet praise on the
Mark
show
the
because they're
day.
filling out the CPE record, which is extremely helpful for me when I'm parsing the data
Yep.
and I want to go, for the past 30 days,
By the
show
way,
me all the Fortinet CVEs and tell me which product they're associated with, because I care more about some than others.
I will raise a hand and cry out, guys, fill out CPE data. Like
Yeah.
right now, it's not usable, and even if you fill it out, in many cases, vendors fill it out in such a way that it's still not usable.
Yeah,
So,
agreed.
well, as a vendor, if you're filling out CPE data, make sure it's standard format and the same model is named the same exact way across your CPE, and the crossovers that actual device returns the information about its model, because otherwise your CPE data is de facto useless.
Yep.
And
Now,
there are a lot of errors in it.
there are. Yes, for sure. Yeah, parsing this data is not easy at all because of these problems that we've already surfaced, right? And so back to CVSS, let's just take 3.1 as an example. Typically, what happens is the CNA, Fortinet, Cisco, Avanti, and that was just a sample data set I was working with, will provide a 3.1 score. And when NVD enriches it, they will also provide a 3.1 CVSS score. Typically, what you'll see in that data is NVD scores it higher than the CNA. And I think that's just biased. I think that the vendors don't want as critical of a score to protect their brand reputation. Like there's a lot of motivations that would go behind, like, oh, this isn't a big of a deal. But when a third party independent organization scores it, it tends to be higher. Now, this is somewhat controversial internally here at Eclipsium, and I think with everyone in the community too. So what I do is, regardless of who scored it, regardless of which version, I just take the highest score. And so I base a lot of my analytics on whatever the highest score was. I don't know. That's my strategy.
Yep.
I mean, you could say maybe there's some flaws in that strategy, but I'm like, if someone spent the time to score this vulnerability and thought about it and plugged in all the fields, and they feel it's more severe than someone else, I'm like, I'm erring on the side of
Yeah, you're
caution.
not
I'm
alone
just
in
going to take the highest
struggling to
score.
parse that data either. We talked a while back about the new OWASP top 10. They did a reissue. The first one's in, they update that thing like every 4 years, maybe. So I think the last one was in 2021. And since then, CVSS version 4 scoring has not really taken off, but is more in usage than it was then. I'm not even sure when it came out, whether it was used at all then. And it's so like CVSS v4 is so different than CVSS v3. And specifically in that it no longer provides exploit or impact scores that are like consistent and compatible with CVSS v2 or v3. And so they couldn't incorporate CVSS for risk scores into. They do a lot of math for the OWASP top 10. It's a very rigorously analytical process to like try to discern what to include on that list. And they basically were just like, CVSS v4 is too complicated and too big of a difference from the prior ones for us to be able to like rigorously incorporate it into their scoring. And so they just disclosed that up front, like we're sticking with v3 for now. And I think out of the like 175,000 CVEs that they mapped to CWEs for it, only 6,000 of them had CVSS v4 scores. So it's like not that many, but I don't know. It kind of reminds me of like IPv4 versus IPv6. It's like, oh, there's this new standard. Maybe in 25 years we'll fully move over it to it just in time for it to be obsolete.
Yeah. It's yeah, I don't remember all the differences between 3.1 and 4.0, but there are differences, and a lot of people don't like 4.0 because it asks questions. Like my recollection when we've debated it is it asks questions that are somewhat ambiguous, that result in just different scores, and I'm not sure. 3.1 is kind of, I think, more cuts to the chase, is my general assessment. So but back to NVD in the article now. So if they're not enriching it, who else is enriching it? CISA has the Enrichment project, which again is one of my sources in the tool that I'm maintaining, and provides great, I think, enrichment data that I use. So CISA will also provide an exploitation indicator, and a lot of sources don't take into account all of the different ways in which an exploit could exist for a given vulnerability. Because like maybe it's not on the kev, but CISA says no, there's an exploit for it, and maybe I missed it in my other data sources. So by having all of the data sources looking for exploits, I can really key in on, hey, there's an exploit that exists for this particular vulnerability. Now, could it be a proof of concept? My tool also kind of errs on the side of caution. If there's a GitHub repo that has a test tool or a description of the vulnerability that gives you all the information you need to create an exploit, I call that an exploit. I need to refine that a little bit, I think, but it's still different from something that has no public information about exploitation or an exploit for a given vulnerability. But CIS's Enrichment is really good. They also indicate whether the vulnerability exploitation is automatable, and they also give a technical impact status on it as well. And so I pull all that. I mean, it's all good information. I think if you're trying to make decisions about how to prioritize vulnerabilities, well, one, as we've talked about on the show in the past, it's kind of a losing battle. If you're trying to play whack-a-mole with vulnerabilities today, you're probably already owned, right? Because of a lot of reasons we've talked about. But having this extra enrichment information above and beyond what NVD is providing can be good, but also comes with caveats, right? So we may now have to rely on the CNA's score for a given vulnerability. And oftentimes that CNA is the vendor who creates that software product. So there's inherent incentives there that could effectively lower that score. So yeah, that's my take on it. I spend too much time. CWE is another thing too. The CWE descriptions are way too long. Even the title of them are long, and there's way too many of them. And I'm now parsing the CWE data to kind of come down to like an exploit vector. Like, is it command injection? Is it a buffer overflow? Is it an authentication bypass? Like just a generic class. But when you look at CWE, common weakness enumeration, there's like probably 6 or 7 or more. I'm just guessing. Like, let's just say there's 6 or 7 that deal with authentication bypass. Like I'm kind of less concerned at a glance the type of authentication bypass it is. What I care about is it an authentication bypass, or is it a command injection, or is it a buffer overflow, right? Those are the kind of things I need for decision points. And again, later you can go dig into the data all you want, but when you're querying and you just want a summary, I like that higher level stuff. So I actually just built into the tool today the ability to assign CWEs and have it kind of shorten. It uses some method to shorten it, so it's not
Nice.
as long of a
We
title.
keep that character count down. Yeah,
pretty cool.
we were talking. I mean, this is only going to get
Yeah.
worse, not better, right? Because we were talking about how the proliferation of AI vuln research and discovery of CVEs, like the number of CVEs, the number of people doing vuln research, the number of people disclosing new CVEs, the number of new CVEs that have already been disclosed. Like, I think that NVD drastically limiting their number of CVEs they're going to enrich is just the first domino, and like there's going to be a whole
Right.
sweeping set of changes that has to happen throughout all of threat research and like cybersecurity land to deal with the just totally undigestible amount of vulnerability research that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly interesting. I wish that we could, one, be more consistent on how CVE records are created. I kind of feel like more fields should be required, like CPE, for example, to be filled out in a CVE record. And I wish we had perhaps some additional fields, because right now I'm trying to figure out, like, if I query the database for a subset of CVEs, and I want specific information. Like, so for example, give me all critical vulnerabilities from this list of network edge appliance vendors that have exploits available, and give me that list. And then I'm like, now tell me, is that an appliance? Is that software? Or is that a SaaS solution that lives in the cloud? So you can use Cisco as an example, because those are basically three different groups or three different problems in my enterprise. If I'm using Cisco products in any capacity, I might have some. I might have some of them, or more than one or whatever. But I want to know critical Cisco vulnerabilities. Well, if it's a network appliance or a switch or a router, that I know goes to one team, right? If it's software, that might be a different team that manages that software. Like if it's, whatever, they've got a million different software products, right? Is it a VPN client, right? Then it needs to go to like a different IT team, because if we need to update 100,000 workstations because their VPN client has a vulnerability, that's a different team, different process from you need to go update these 10,000 switches because they have a critical vulnerability. The other one I saw this week was Cisco related, came up in my search, and it was a fix for Cisco WebEx, but that's only a SaaS product. So they actually fixed a vulnerability in their SaaS product. That means I don't have to do anything. Right? And so I need to know that. So I think there should be a better indicator of what software product it is. One, CPE data, right? And like two, like what is it? Is it a cloud service? Is it a
Yeah.
software? Is it an operating system? Is it an appliance? Is it an IoT device? There should be, I think, some kind of categorization built into it.
Yeah, and to be honest, like CWE data is not as useful. Like,
Yep.
yeah, you can have it, but there are so many overlaps between CWEs, and it's so complex to actually come up with a good list of CWEs
Yep.
that you will not ever be able to rely on it as a vendor, right?
Also
So
not
like,
required when you create a CVE record.
yep. And this is the reason why it's not required. It's incredibly complex to come up with it.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, what we are clawing at is CWC CPE precision. And like right now, every single vendor who deals with vulnerability detection ultimately just builds their own way to identify devices other
Mm-hmm.
than CPE. And like CPE also ultimately lacks information about how versioning is built. So like example is Cisco. Cisco loves non-standard versioning schema. I don't know why they picked the versioning schema they did, but it's not somewhere, it's not anything standard. So you
No.
cannot just compare them with like standard operations. Ultimately, like if the vendors could provide information on how to basically compare versions, it would make checking for vulnerabilities like many times faster than just trying to check against a huge set of
Yeah.
known vulnerable and vulnerable versions.
Well, and it sparked a thought, because there's also the component, right? So I'll
Yeah.
use F5 as an example here, because I think, Vlad, you and I were testing this. So you have a version of F5, it's 15.1 or whatever, and that could have a vulnerability, right? Maybe that version is vulnerable, but it's only vulnerable if it has a specific component. It would kind of be nice, I don't know how you would define this, but it would be nice if there was some way to disclose, other than in the description, which component is affected. Because then it would know, like, oh, wait, I have F5. Oh, I have that version. But the vulnerability I'm thinking of, I don't know the CVE off the top of my head. You had to have the APM. What was APM, Vlad? Um, it was like some identity management kind of feature in F5 had to be enabled, and then you're vulnerable. I think we just saw this with Arista as well. Arista was like, actually, this one's being exploited in the wild. This version's vulnerable, but it's only vulnerable if you have this specific configuration. And by the way, if you have this other configuration, that's a mitigating control and it's not vulnerable. But there's
Yep.
no way to glean that unless you go read the vendor advisory, from top to
Yep.
bottom, and understand it.
Yep. And it's not very obvious how to even verify that. Like,
Yep.
you cannot like, okay, how do you verify if this configuration is on? And this
Well,
task is
that's
like,
our problem, right? That's
yeah,
our
that's
engineering
literally
problem currently. Yeah.
that's literal engineering problem, and vendors don't usually provide those. So vendors say, "Oh, hey, if this is enabled, great," but you don't provide instructions on how to check this.
Yeah.
So
So then
like,
you're gonna go read their
you,
document, or I use Claude, right, or an AI to
yeah,
go. And I'm gonna go read their documentation, hope the AI is not hallucinating, because
yep,
I can't be an expert on 30 different vendors and
mm-hmm,
all of the platforms that they have. I need some way to easily go figure out what is the configuration that would represent a good. We talked about input, output, and outcomes, right? What's
mm-hmm.
the good configuration? What's the insecure configuration, and how do I test for it?
Yup, and even worse is that like with a growing number of CVs which will be discovered, the more AI gets better, and the
Oh
more
yeah, we're already seeing
specifically
that.
attackers get better at using AI, there will be a lot more of CVs coming in, and like this is
Yep,
whether we can handle it or not.
yep,
So
100%.
like vendors have to cooperate. If vendors don't, then like we are basically stuck. Like there will be like a insane number of vulnerabilities that like you will have to come up with the checks manually.
One of my favorite vulnerabilities that, ironically enough, we talked about CVE. This one doesn't have a CVE. This is the conversation that I had within the community uh 10 plus years ago, that not every vulnerability has a CVE. And here's a pretty major one. It's called YellowKey. It's BitLocker bypass. It was published by Nightmare Eclipse, who has had a recent run, an impressive run of vulnerability disclosures to Microsoft. This person is very frustrated with the disclosure process at Microsoft, and I don't want to take sides there. I mean, there's people at MSRC that are doing great work. I've spoken with them, I've interviewed them, but we still run into these cases where there are disagreements between a security researcher and a major vendor about whether this is a vulnerability or not, whether or not this should have a CVE, whether or not the vendor's going to fix it. We still have those discussions today. Um, I don't have any insights as to what the negotiations were, how they went. So I can't. I don't really want to weigh in and start pointing fingers, right, at Microsoft or the researcher. Like, I just don't. Just know that this is a situation where those negotiations in the disclosure process did not have a very good outcome for really anyone, right? So what ends up happening is the researcher got frustrated and published their findings to GitHub. And this is a bypass that requires either a USB stick or a modification to the EFI partition. It also requires that you reboot the system or change the power state. I'm assuming you could push there's lots of ways to get into what we call WinRE, or Windows Recovery Environment. You have to be in a Windows Recovery environment. You have to have it read specific files. These deal with the file system, NTFS file system, that then basically trick Windows and various subsystems, trick the TPM into going, oh, by the way, here's the key to unlock the drive, because it's part of that Windows recovery process. I'm glossing over a whole bunch of technical details. You should totally go read about it. I had to do research on my own to understand it. If you plug in the FSTX is the specific feature that is being abused. I don't know if it's abused is the right way, right? But basically, that's what's triggering the bypass to trick the TPM going, oh, sure, I'll unlock the drive. Like, you're in recovery mode. Why wouldn't I unlock the drive? The public version that's available would still require a TPM pin. The author claims to have a version that does not require a pin.
Oh my.
Effectively, this means there is a working bypass for BitLocker. This has been verified by third parties. I think Kevin Beaumont and Will Dorman, Windows prolific, vulnerability hunters, have verified this and validated that this does in fact work. So I think we're saying is BitLocker is not effective any longer, given this this bug, this feature. Some conspiracy theorists say it's a backdoor that Microsoft put it there purposely. I don't think that's true. I think one of my other friends said it's more likely this was like an engineering workaround, like in testing that got accidentally left in. That's the theory that I think is more plausible, but maybe you guys feel differently. Maybe when he wants to put on your tinfoil hats and say Microsoft built a BitLocker backdoor in for governments or something.
Yeah, it does. Like I have been looking at this. I love a good conspiracy, but on this one, it does feel a lot like a backdoor would feel. Like, let's create a very specific file on a
Yeah.
very specific location, and suddenly you have BitLocker bypass, which
Right.
only triggers in one specific condition, and in normal conditions, it's removed for mysterious reasons.
Isn't that crazy?
Tasty. Isn't that like?
When you put it
I
like
wonder
that,
how that
Vlad, now
works.
I'm on the conspiracy theory bandwagon.
Like I cannot I of course I cannot know for sure,
Yeah.
and I will probably never know for sure, but if there ever was a backdoor, that smells a lot like one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great point. I like this. I know we were talking internally. I like this coupled with the KVM research because that gives you physical access. And through an IP-based KVM, you can remotely mount a USB drive and boot the system off of it. You could also do this with a BMC. So now an attacker that wants to, well, I guess if an attacker had access to the system while it was running, BitLocker wouldn't matter anyway, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I mean, okay, what is it?
there's that.
Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which you could attribute to stupidity. But what's
Dude, so funny. I had to look that quote up yesterday because I'm like,
Yeah.
I know that there's a name for that phrase, and I don't remember the exact
that's
wording.
fucking
And I
Hanlon's
looked it up. I was
razor,
like,
yeah.
oh, Hanlon's razor.
So what's
That's what I was
the
looking for.
what's the stupidity
Hanlon's razor,
case
yep.
for this one? I guess that it was an engineering workaround.
That's the whole point.
Okay.
I cannot come up with a stupidity case. Like, why would you have such a complicated feature which triggers only on specific files and have it only in one place but not the other?
Yeah.
That's like, and you have journals on this
Mhm.
fix in both versions, so it doesn't sound like a feature that would suddenly be implemented differently in WinRE and normal Windows. And like, then there is also like a very specific feature which only works in Windows recovery environment, and the author claims to have a full bypass of PIN in there. Like, come on, how much stupidity can you even survive? This doesn't sound like stupidity, and that's why I'm a little bit more leaning towards conspiracy bandwagon.
I'm with you now, Vlad. You converted me. Now I'm on the
So,
conspiracy
like,
bandwagon.
But again, disclaimer to the viewers: there is no hard evidence or hard data.
Yeah,
So
right.
we can only speculate. This is only
The beauty of a
speculation.
podcast, man. That's what
Plausible
we do. We
deniability.
Yeah, we speculate, and we don't. There is no hard proof that we can present you with of either
Yeah.
stupidity case or conspiracy case. For stupidity case, you would need commit logs from Microsoft, which would like explain the stupidity. For conspiracy case, you need some government agency to come out and says, yes, that's us. You're probably getting neither, ever.
Yeah. I guess the attack scenario with the KVM could be that I'm an attacker, I gain access to the KVM, but the workstation's locked. And now I need to reboot it to gain access to the data. But if it's protected by BitLocker, I need a BitLocker bypass to access the data. That's a really kind of obscure use case, but plausible nonetheless.
So
I'm curious to see how the story unfolds. And what will be interesting, let's say Microsoft does release a fix for it. Are they going to patch Windows 10 or just Windows 11?
With how Microsoft are, they're probably gonna patch on Windows 11.
Right.
Like,
I think they did patch a different bug in BitLocker, right? And they only did it for 11. I thought I saw that this week.
Microsoft did the biggest service to Linux migration they ever could forcing people to install Linux on their outdated devices, and suddenly people are starting to finding out that Linux is not that bad.
Yeah, I'm on that bandwagon, dude. As you guys know, I use Arch, by the way. So there's that.
Yep.
I thought I had. Oh, so one of the last thing on this one. One of the mitigations recommended is to apply a BIOS password, and then I think Vlad, we've talked about this on the show before, and you spent some time with BIOS password bypasses. And remember we covered one that was like a really roundabout way to break the BIOS password. Of course, there's the I removed the CMOS battery is one, but that doesn't always work. What were some of the other BIOS? There was another BIOS. Oh, if you want to swap the SPY flash chip out, you can potentially bypass the password. You're not really bypass it, but you just if you got a laptop and it's protected with a BIOS password, you go buy that same model laptop and you pull the SPY flash chip out of the one you bought from eBay and hope that it isn't password protected, and you just put it in the one that is password protected, and magically it no longer asks for the password. And there's other techniques I know as well. But Vlad, is a BIOS password a good mitigation? Like where does that fall on the scale of mitigation for this particular attack?
You mean for the
For the BitLocker, like
yellow key, right?
I can't
So
use YellowKey if there's a
it
BIOS
it it
password.
it it it, it depends a lot on like first of all, does resetting CMOS also reset your BitLocker key or not, and
Yeah,
just how good is your attacker? Because
that's a
like
great question.
ultimately, like depending on the device, I presume there can be extra issues where you can just reset the BIOS password and be done with it, and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you can use the full attack again. Or there also can be like password bypasses, and then there is password for access to laptop, and there is a password for access to BIOS, which are two different passwords.
Mm-hmm.
And like if it is just the second password for access to BIOS, then well, you don't care. So there is a whole slew of questions that can be asked here. Like I didn't research if like resetting BIOS password will also reset BitLocker, and also there might be more than one way to actually reset it, right?
Right.
So ultimately, it's a very hard question to answer. Maybe it will help. It for sure will make the attack more complex, but
Yeah.
will it prevent it? Probably depends on the device.
Well, you got me thinking now. If you swap the SPY flash chip out, does BitLocker recognize a hardware change? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I could look it up, but if I find something, I'll put it in the show notes. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
Chase, do you have a couple of stories you wanted to hit during this episode?
I
Or
mean,
do we just
one of the other ones we got in the notes is the
put them in here? We
Foxconn
had one of them.
breach, which we can get into.
Yes.
No, I didn't have any other stories immediately off the top of the dome to talk about, but there is just constantly stuff happening, and happy to throw stuff in the hopper. But we should definitely talk about the Foxconn breach. That's a big deal. The volume of data being claimed in that one.
Yeah.
I feel like every time I hear about a big new ransomware, the amount of data that's being claimed to have been like exfiltrated or whatever for ransom is enormous and unprecedented. This one was like 8 terabytes or something like that. Wasn't there one that was in the petabytes recently? What was the reason with the ransomware thing that happened that was like some number of petabytes of data had been exfiltrated? It was like, how much data do these businesses even have? That's so much.
Mm. Yeah, it's crazy. Uh, companies have a lot of data. I mean, this is the MO
No.
of groups today. They're not
Yeah.
just ransomware, right? But they're stealing everything. Uh, in a lot of cases, they're just stealing it,
Yeah.
not even encrypting it as part of a ransomware campaign, but they're just stealing the data and then sifting through it later.
And then when it doesn't really, once it's gone, it's gone. Like there's no world in which the ransom group deletes that data when you pay the ransom and doesn't keep using it for something or leaking it in some other way. So you're just, I don't know.
Right.
I think there's been some efforts to make it illegal to pay ransoms. I mean, Foxconn's in China, right? So it's like, law different over there. But
Wow, this says it's impacting. It does have
oh,
North American
okay. I need
factories.
to read more. I need
I
to
don't know if
read the
that's
story before
hallucinating or
I
not.
shoot my mouth off.
Yeah. So Foxconn makes components for Apple, Google, Nvidia, and Sony. Apple being the most notable one. It's a double extortion ransomware group. So they did encrypt the files. Well, they're known for encrypting the files, but also stealing them first and threatening to leak it, which is, that's common.
I'm
these
flipping through
days.
the responses on Twitter to the original tweet from Dominic Alvieri that we pulled up, and I'm loving this one that says Foxconn breach is such a perfect example of why hardware supply chain sovereignty matters. 8 terabytes of Google and Intel topology specs exfiltrated from Apple's #1 supplier. When your entire infrastructure ultimately sits on components from a handful of manufacturers, you don't have sovereignty, you have rented trust. Love that phrase, rented trust. Hardware roots of trust can't be
Rented
outsourced
trust.
forever.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
These incidents are going to keep accelerating. That ties it. That couldn't be more of a tee up for our sort of conversations about this type of thing. Like the hardware supply
Right.
chain. When we talked about on numerous recent episodes and other things, the router ban and how the question of like, okay, does onshoring the manufacturing of routers actually help with our cybersecurity at all? And it's very questionable. And this is a way more salient sort of example of a situation where having these, TPM, hardware root of trust sort of components in devices that everybody uses feels, I don't know. Yeah. The hardware supply chain conversation around this type of device feels more interesting to me than the router one.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, like, could there have been keys that were in that 8 terabytes that could lead to future supply chain attacks? I mean, if you look at Apple's infrastructure in their hardware,
Yeah.
it's a very tightly closed ecosystem that relies on their own hardware root of trust, but it requires a manufacturer like Foxconn to actually build and test and do all that. It wouldn't surprise me if there's at least test keys in that 8 terabytes of data. I mean, maybe not, but there could be. Vlad, thoughts on that?
It could be. It depends a lot on how exactly they manage keys, but as we know, large organizations are not well known to manage keys well on all levels. So chances of there being surprise keys in 8 terabytes of data are pretty darn high, even though Apple might have a whole corporate process around it.
Right.
But I never viewed the 8 terabytes of data. By the way, this is a good use case for AI. Ask AI to find keys in that.
Right.
If you have
Well,
the
that's the
leak.
problem that these groups are having that I learned a couple weeks ago is like I think it's Leak Bazaar. Like there's groups that the service they provide to other threat actors will go through the data that you stole and tell you what you have and what the value is of it. Because going through 8 terabytes of data is a lot of work and you have to know what you're looking for. And so there's groups that specialize in that, which is crazy. So we'll see. 11 million files. Yeah, you're right. That's a job for AI. I don't want to go through 11 million files. Could you use grep?
Probably. You can grab for common stuff and also truthful hog. It's like collection of regexes for grab.
It takes some time, certainly. So we'll see what comes out of it. Like, what are they? I wonder what their goal. Like, are they going to just release all of it?
So there is a good question.
They did
I'm
release
just thinking.
samples. It looks like a lot of schematics.
There is a very good question of like what's even released. Like unless you have all 8 terabytes, you cannot really run all of this.
Yeah.
Attackers probably can scan like whomever has 8 terabytes can scan it with Trufflehog and come out to us with the answer. But like
It's interesting. It's interesting to see if it impacts the manufacturers like Apple and Nvidia, right? I'm sure the security researchers are chomping at the bit for this data to be able to analyze it, right? For some kind of flaw or vulnerability.
yeah, but like we as researchers don't have uh,
Yeah, we don't have access
so
to the data.
we don't have access. Like it's just speculation. Like and if with YellowKey we at least sees evidence and can speculate better, in this case it's like, does it have keys? Does it not have keys? What's in the black box? Guess it right now. Like the talk shows. Like we don't know, and there is no evidence to point us either way. Like there is high chance there is something. So I wouldn't just sit on my behind and not do anything. If I would be Foxconn and Apple, I would be like rushing to reset as many keys as I can.
Yeah, agreed.
With this deep reset.
Vlad, I think you also had the story about a mini Shai-Hulud supply chain attack on NPM.
Yep, it's not just NPM, by the way. So, like, supply chain attacks on package managers continues. Yet another time we see the attack of Shai-Hulud style, and where multiple packages were compromised. This time it's multiple package managers, and we know of Pipey packages which also were compromised, specifically Mistral AI, which is, by the way, a relatively popular package.
What does Shai-Hulud style mean?
So
what are the characteristics of a Shai-Hulud style attack?
So like when one like one package gets compromised, and then it gets deployed on developer machines, and then suddenly attackers have a lot more npm tokens and pipey tokens, and they publish yet another package into pipey and npm. That package gets downloaded, and they get even more tokens, and the attack continues to spread this way, right? So this is pretty much how original Shai-Hulud worm worked, and they just pretty much did it again. And this will continue, by the way. This attack will not keep stopping. So your only approach to this is to lock your dependencies behind by 2 weeks at least, and like let people notice this Shai-Hulud thing first, and fix it before it gets to you. So this is the most effective defense you can
That's
make.
interesting. So you put a delay in your updating your dependencies in 2 weeks. Is it? Yeah, because usually we discover these within 2 weeks. Usually.
Yeah, it's usually, and like the 2 weeks delay is a very good approach, and some kind of proactive package scanning is a good approach. And you need to lock all of your dependencies by hash, because nobody is stopping attackers from publishing a package with an older version packet. You can retag packages in this package managers.
Oh, I see. And so you can lock them in by hash?
Yep. There are tools. Like for example, for Python, you don't want to use raw pip. You want to use poetry, or more modern alternative is UV, by the way. UV will produce a log file which lists package hashes for everything. And npm also does create a log file which logs package hashes for everything. Rely on that. Besides just delaying the updates. So like
I never
instead of getting
that
infected,
supply chain attack path. Yeah, and I'm gonna go poison a previous version of the library.
It's the most obvious one, and I believe Shai-Hulud even did this. At least either mini Shai-Hulud or new Shai-Hulud. You can retag stuff in these package managers. And like there is some need to actually start creating signatures for all of this, so that like developers actually have to sign their packages, which would make the attack a little bit harder. But like right now, this is a very open problem. Like it's very not obvious how to solve it beyond delaying.
Which is already kind of a best practice in enterprise technology, right? Like places will say like we don't bring on the new. We're N-1 at most for firmware versions. We don't update to the very newest one. We have like 1 or 2 versions back, because who knows
Yep.
what kind of garbage is in the new version.
Mm-hmm. And you want as bombs for everything, so that like if Shai-Hulud happens, you can quickly check if your entire fleet has a surprise. So like at the very least, this way you will protect production systems. It can still get on developer machines, but that's like a whole different beast, which has like EDRs and whatnot already looking at it.
This one had 2 really
So,
funny
yeah.
/ dirty wrinkles to it that I feel like we should talk about. One, I saw a great take from Twitter user at Lori Wired, that's a great account, that the most low effort / high reward thing you can do for security is installing the Russian language pack, because apparently the info stealer that being dropped by this Shai-Hulud compromised packages avoids executing in Russian language environments. So like, what's stopping you from just installing the Russian language pack? Which, mileage may vary, but it's a funny bit.
It was just the original Shai-Hulud. And there is also like a project which is called Digital Scarecrow. Don't remember the link, let me Google for that. But the whole point is that it runs processes which looks a hell of a lot like you are running in an emulated environment. Like, actually, let me post the link into chat. Not sure how that will be shared to viewers, but at the very least, we can.
The other funny tidbit about it was that,
and I don't have access to chat. Great.
This is
Chase, Paul, please post this to people. And the whole idea behind this is that if your environment looks a lot like it's emulated and being a research environment, there is a chance that malware will look at it and get scared and not run.
Yeah, that's fun. Deception.
Oh, there was a cybersecurity company that did that. They put deception techniques on the system to trick malware into thinking it was in like a virtual environment. So they'd load like fake virtual drivers as an example, and then the malware go, "Oh, I'm not doing anything on this system." And so they would do that on like your production Windows or Mac systems. They would put basically evidence or markers in there that would basically turn the malware off based on what it was checking for. I don't know what happened.
That was a whole. I mean, deception was the whole category. I don't remember
really
what all counts as that, but
yeah, I don't think we're in deception category, but it was malware deception, like locally on every workstation. It was pretty wild. I don't know what ever happened to them. I think they got bought, would be my guess. But
the other dirty little like tidbit about this one though was that, according to the Bleeping Computer article about it, a destructive secondary routine is also present in the info stealer. In environments that appear to originate from Israel or Iran, the malware introduces a probabilistic sabotage mechanism with a 1 in 6 chance of running a recursive wipe command. So it's going to run RMRF. It's rolling a D6 on whether it tries to wipe your whole system if it looks like you're from Israel or Iran, which is just nasty work, man.
Yep. It's like very, very evil. And like, I don't know, the old joke about Russian roulette and terminal. There's like 2 guys running a 1 in 6 chance to wipe the hard drive on their production servers is like, it stopped being a meme.
Everything is becoming a casino, right? Even the malware internals.
I mean, why the hell not? It's funny. As a malware author, I would do that.
Introduce a feature where you can do side bets on whether or not it is gonna run the recursive wipe on your system or not before it actually does it. Put it up on Polymarket.
Yeah, like I'm waiting for attackers to actually like run a poly market themselves, like how many Israeli systems they will wipe, and produce some live statistics where you can actually bet on how many are wiped in 5 minutes. In 5
it has to be
minutes.
happening.
Like if I would be an attacker, I would totally do that at one point. This is how you know that I'm not an attacker, by the way.
Cool. Anything else this week?
I think we
I think we have enough for this week. What
We
else?
did.
have we
Covered a
covered?
lot of ground. Covered a lot of ground. Well, Vlad, Chase, thanks for joining today. Thanks everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Below the Surface. We'll see you next time.